Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Last week, the MLA for River Heights and I met with more than a dozen ranchers who are deeply concerned about changes to Crown lands leases. We know this government has said that young farmers are a priority, but we talked to several young farmers who say the changes are going to hurt them. The people we talked to were blunt. They are going to lose their farms or their retirement if the rules stay as they are. These rules will bankrupt Manitoba farmers. None of us want that. Will the Premier listen to ranchers and the Manitoba beef producers and change the rules to ensure stability and long-term growth?
The Honourable First Minister.
This latter-day awareness the Liberals seem to have discovered, like the NDP, of a part of the province that is actually outside of the perimeter highway is refreshing. It's refreshing to hear the acknowledgement from the leader of the former Liberal Party that he understands that there is a rural Manitoba. But he perhaps might also accept the responsibility for his federal colleagues attempting to bring in legislation just 2 years ago, which would have made it virtually impossible for family farms to be left to family farm members. That could be a major undertaking on his part. We stood up against such proposals. The provincial Liberals and NDP remained silent. They had no sympathy, they had no understanding, and they had no affection or empathy for the plight that was being foisted upon rural Manitoba farm families. We did, we acted, we'll continue to.
Good.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're not asking for a return to the old program, which had issues. We're asking for the government not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The beef industry in Manitoba, especially the Interlake, has faced everything from BSE to flooding and now a state of emergency due to drought. The affected communities are hoping they can get freight assistance for feed because hay is in such short supply. These new measures for Crown lands leases drives up the cost of farming while providing no added value in return. The new system offers no advantage for young farmers or local farmers. The advantage is to anyone with deep pockets, whether they live in Manitoba or not. Will this government go back to the drawing board and ensure that local producers and Manitoba farm families are given priority in Crown land leases?
The Honourable First Minister.
Desperation and pretty rich for a Liberal to talk about helping farm families when the federal Liberal government is foisting a carbon tax on family farms that will disproportionately hurt them. People in rural communities don't have the option of public transit. The member needs to understand that our Made in Manitoba plan would have really assisted rural Manitoba families and all families in hitting our carbon targets while recognizing the differences in the nature of the challenges that have to be faced by rural and northern residents. The federal Liberal government doesn't recognize this. We would have exempted, for example, the carbon levy on anything involved with grain drying. And this is an important issue for family farms. The member could look it up. Grain drying. It's something that if he understood, he would understand the punitive nature of the carbon tax that the federal Liberal government has put on Manitoba family farms. We understand it. We'll stand against it. He stands for it.
The Honourable Member for River Heights on a final supplemental question.
Mr. Speaker, the government is ending the practice of unit transfers for Crown lands. This practice allowed ranchers to build up equity so that when they retired, they would have what is equivalent to a pension. In taking away unit transfers, the government is taking away hard-earned pensions from beef producers. In addition, the government will now impose an increase in the lease rates for Crown lands by about 350%. This lease rate is equivalent to a tax. Why is the Premier's government increasing the tax on ranchers by 350% and making the tax increases produced by the NDP look like chicken feed?
The Honourable First Minister. Order.
That might be an appropriate way to describe the quality of that question. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the fact is that the federal Liberal government has been very, very pleased to jack up costs for family farms. They've even threatened them in terms of their ability to succeed going to the next generation. And now, as we try to protect family farms around the Lake Manitoba Basin, they stand in the way. They obstruct as we try to protect families who have been sacrificed for years to protect the rest of us. The federal government continues to move the yardsticks on approval processes that now have cost the people of Manitoba over $60 million just in consultations, planning, and studies, let alone getting to the plan being enacted and actually protecting people. So would the member join with us in exhorting the federal government to allow us to protect the farm families and the Indigenous people around Lake Manitoba Basin as soon as possible, rather than delaying the project in perpetuity?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Farm families in Manitoba